Lighthouse Blues. Someone was playing music in the middle of the night. It sounded like a clarinet. I could only hear it when the wind dropped, but there was no mistake about it. I shivered, even though I was snug in bed. I wasn't cold, I was scared. Stan and I were the only people on the island, and he was in bed in the next room. So who was playing the music? It was cold outside and a storm was brewing up. I could hear the sea pounding against the cliffs. I got out of bed and looked out of the window. All I could see was the black clouds racing across the moon and the light from the lighthouse stabbing into the night. The music seemed to be coming from the lighthouse. I thought about waking Stan up, but I decided not to. He was the lighthouse keeper. He was a nice old boy, but I didn't want him to think I was scared. I was hoping to get a job as a lighthouse keeper myself one day. This was my first night on the island, and I wanted to make a good impression. I climbed back into bed and closed my eyes. I tried not to listen to the music. It was soft and far away, but it crept into my brain. It was like a soft voice calling to me. It was saying something. It was speaking without words. Somehow I knew that the music was meant for me. But who was playing? And why did it make me feel so sad? It was so sad I felt like crying, but I didn't know why. After a long time, I fell asleep with the music still sounding in my ears. The next morning at breakfast, I asked Stan if he'd heard anything.
No, Anton, I didn't hear anything. I never do. But I know there's something there. Visitors to the island always hear it. Most people can't stand it. They get scared and leave. You're the third helper that I've had here this year.
Well, who could be playing the music? And why can't you hear it? I asked him. Stan looked at me for a long time. He looked straight into my eyes, as if he was trying to see what I was thinking.
Put on your coat, boy, and come with me.
A strong wind was blowing. Stan took me along a track which ran along the top of the rocky cliffs. At last we came to a grave. Its headstone was facing out to sea. It was a lonely, windswept spot high on the cliff. Alan Rickard, 1915 to 1960. Lighthouse keeper from 1950 to 1960. R.I.P. Stan pointed to the grave.
Alan Rickard was my father.
The gravestone had a small drawing in the corner of a clarinet.
All the Rickards are musical, said Stan. My father played the clarinet, and I play the saxophone.
Stan and I walked slowly back to the house. The wind was blowing strongly. It flattened the grass and made my hair whip into my eyes. Stan had to shout so that I could hear.
I can't play any more, though. My fingers won't work properly. I have arthritis. My saxophone is in the music room at the top of the lighthouse. My father and I used to play up there when he was alive, but I don't go in there anymore. I can't bear to.
Stan's eye was wet. Perhaps the wind was doing it. Or was he crying? We walked back to the house. I didn't know what to think. Did the grave have anything to do with that sad music? The next day was Thursday. I told Stan I was going for a walk to look around the island, but instead I went to the lighthouse. I pushed open the door at the bottom and went in. It was gloomy inside. I went slowly up the stairs, around and around. It was as quiet as a grave. At last I reached the top. There were 2 doors. One led into the light, and the other was the door of the music room. I tried the handle. It was stiff, but it opened, and I stepped inside. There was a music stand and a small table. On the table was a clarinet and a saxophone. I looked at them. They were covered in dust. Neither of these instruments could have been playing on Friday night. There was something creepy about this room, so I decided to leave. Over the next few months, I was kept very busy on the island. I had to measure the rainfall and record the weather. I had to man the radio and listen for ships that were in trouble. And every night at 5 o'clock, I had to climb the stairs of the lighthouse and start up the light. I didn't go into the music room, and I didn't say anything to Stan about the music. But every Friday at about midnight, the music would start. Such sad, haunting music. I wondered who was playing and why. The next Friday, I waited until Stan was in bed asleep, and then I crept out of the house and into the dark night. It was cold and windy. The moon was hidden behind black clouds. Spray was blowing up from the sea, and the waves were crashing and sucking beneath the cliffs. In the distance, I could hear music. At last, I reached the lighthouse door. It was dark inside, and the music was floating down from above. I was scared. Even though I didn't want to go up, I forced myself to. My knees were knocking together as I climbed the dark stairs. I went round and around. Music echoed. It seemed to be laughing at me. "You won't get rid of me," I said aloud. "You won't scare me off like the others." I tried to sound tough, but I didn't feel tough. I forced my legs to take me all the way up to the music room. That's where the music was coming from. There was light coming from under the door. The music was very loud, but I was too scared to go in. And then the door started to open on its own. It just slowly opened. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I started to shake all over. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The clarinet was playing itself. It was floating in mid-air. Someone or something was playing it, but whoever it was invisible. I was really scared. I decided to get out of there. Then I thought about the other 2 boys who'd left the island. I wasn't going to be scared off like them. No fear. No ghost was going to chase me away. I took a step forward, but as soon as I entered the room, the music stopped. The clarinet floated through the air and landed on the table. Everything was quiet. I went over to the table and picked it up. The clarinet was covered in cobwebs. It looked as if it hadn't been played for years. But something had been blowing that clarinet only moments before. A ghost. It had to be a ghost. A ghost of Alan Rickard, Stan's father. But why was he so unhappy? And why did he want to scare away everyone who came to the island? I started to shiver. I felt as if cold, cold hands were touching me. Cold hands from the grave. I let out a scream and ran for my life. When I got back to the house, Stan was sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up at me as I came in.
I've just had a radio message. They're going to pull down the lighthouse. They say they'll be here next Friday to put in an automatic one that doesn't need a keeper.
My mouth fell open. Stan would be out of a job, and so would I.
My father died here. I wanted to spend my last days here too. Now I'll have to go and live on the mainland. They'll probably put me in an old folks' home.
Suddenly I had an idea. Wait a minute, don't give up yet, Stan. We're not the only ones on this island, you know. We can get some help. We have to put up a fight to save the lighthouse. Stan looked up at me sadly. He didn't know what I was talking about. I knew why the music was playing. The ghost lived in the lighthouse. He didn't want it to be knocked down either, so he played spooky music every time a stranger came to the island, to scare them off. He wasn't worried about Stan. Stan was his son, and he loved the island and the lighthouse too. That's why Stan never heard the music. But playing music on Friday nights wouldn't work. Not against the wreckers. They were going to be here in the daytime. I had to talk to the ghost. I ran out of the house and up to the music room. Listen, mate, I know you're here. Show yourself. I'm your friend, and I want to save the lighthouse too, but I need your help. Nothing happened. There was dead silence. I started to get angry. You stupid ghost! Don't you know this place is going to be knocked down? The wreckers are coming on Friday. We've got to stop them. Stan and I need your help. Playing music on Friday nights won't stop them. We have to think of something else. Silence. If the ghost was there, he wasn't saying anything. Then I noticed something. Drops of water were slowly dribbling through the air. They looked like raindrops running down a piece of glass. But there was no glass there. At first I felt frightened, and then I realized what they were. They were tears. Teardrops running down an invisible face. The ghost was crying. Look, I said, I can't see you and I can't hear you. If you want to help, pick up the musical instrument. Very slowly, the clarinet started to rise in the air. As it did so, the dust and cobwebs disappeared. It was sparkling like new. We need you to scare the wreckers off, I said. You'll have to come outside to do that, in broad daylight. The music stopped. The clarinet started waggling from side to side. The ghost didn't want to go outside. It's no good doing that, I said. If you want to save the lighthouse, you've got to come outside. I walked out of the room and started going down the stairs. Halfway down, I looked over my shoulder. The clarinet was slowly floating down behind me. It was bobbing up and down as it went. Hang on to that clarinet, I told the ghost. It's the only way I know where you are. When we got to the bottom, I looked outside. The wind was blowing a little bit. It wasn't very strong, only a breeze. The clarinet slowly floated outside. Then something terrible happened. It started to drift off. The breeze was blowing the ghost toward the edge of the cliff. I ran over and tried to grab the clarinet, but my fingers went right through it. It wasn't solid. When the ghost touched the clarinet, it changed. It became ghostly, and there was nothing I could do to help. The ghost drifted closer and closer to the edge of the cliff. Then the clarinet fell to the ground and started to move along in little jumps. I knew what was happening. The ghost was crawling. He was using the grass to drag himself back. It took a long time, but at last he reached the lighthouse and went inside. I tried to follow him, but the door slammed in my face. The ghost was mad at me, and I didn't blame it. After all, I'd nearly got it killed, if you know what I mean. I told Stan about what had happened.
"Yes," he said. "I knew something was up there. I thought it might be my dear old Dad, but I didn't really know. I've never heard it myself."
I went up to the music room every day that week. I begged and I pleaded. But nothing happened. The room was cold and empty. At last, Friday came. A ship arrived at first light. It unloaded 3 men and a bulldozer. The men set up camp down by the beach. Stan and I watched them from the house.
"I'm going down to see them," said Stan.
I watched him walk down to the beach. He was bent over and he walked slowly. His white beard flapped in the wind. A strong southwesterly was blowing. I saw him talking to the men. He was pointing to the lighthouse and shaking his head. One of the men started waving his fists. I could see they were shouting at each other. Stan turned round and came back to the house.
"It's no use," he said. "They won't listen. They've given us until lunchtime to get all our things out of the lighthouse. Then they're going to knock it down. The only thing I want is my saxophone. Not that I can play it anymore, not with these old hands. Go and get it for me, will you, boy?"
I went up to the music room and picked up Stan's old saxophone. I decided to leave the clarinet. That belonged to the ghost. After lunch, the bulldozer started up toward the lighthouse. There was a very narrow path where the track went close to the edge of the cliff. Stan and I sat down on the track. We held hands and waited. It didn't take long for the bulldozer to reach us. Its big steel blade stopped just in front of our faces. The driver got down.
"Get out of the way or I'll squash you flat."
"No," said Stan. "We're not moving." I looked up at the driver. He was an ugly-looking brute and he was big, very big. He picked Stan up with one hand and threw him out of the way. Stan landed on the ground with a thump. He didn't move. "Leave him alone! He's an old man! Leave him alone!" The driver gave an ugly grin.
"Now it's your turn."
But then I noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. It was very still. I listened carefully. Yes, I could hear music. The door of the lighthouse opened and out came the clarinet. The driver of the bulldozer couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. A clarinet was floating through the air and playing a tune. He jumped off the dozer and ran down the track. He was screaming his head off. The clarinet floated over to the bulldozer and hovered above the seat. The bulldozer started moving backwards toward the sea. The ghost had put it into reverse gear. It rumbled slowly toward the cliff, and then it tumbled over. At the last moment, the ghost jumped clear and came floating back toward the other 2 men. "Help! Help! No! No! Oh no! Help! Help! Ah!" And that was the last I saw of them. I looked round for Stan. He was lying still on the grass. I knew he was dead. I looked at the grey sea. The wind was blowing the spray high into the air. The wind! "Quick!" I yelled. "Back to the lighthouse! The wind's getting up!" But I was too late. A sudden gust of wind blew the ghost over the edge and out to sea. I watched as the clarinet drifted away, getting smaller and smaller until it was gone. Well, that's just about the end of the story. Stan was buried next to his father. The wreckers didn't come back. Their union said that the men would never work on the island again because it was too dangerous. I was made lighthouse keeper. I love the island, but it gets very lonely. I often wish that Stan was still alive. Last night something happened. Something good. It was Friday. I was just closing my eyes when I thought I heard music. I jumped out of bed and ran to the lighthouse as fast as I could. I stopped when I reached the music room. Something was different. I pushed open the door a tiny bit and peeped in. The clarinet was floating in the air as usual. But there was another instrument as well. It was the saxophone. It looked as if it was playing itself. But I knew that Stan was playing it. There were two ghosts now.